acquiring some software, or if you want to build it yourself. You've now started to enter into a make-buy study, even in your own mind. You just might not have started documenting it, but you've picked criteria that you care about. Is it expensive? Is it going to work in this environment? Other things like that. So another example would be you just started a project and you started thinking about how long this project is going to be, how many people are going to be on it, what costs are we talking about. You might be thinking about it just because that's what's naturally going through your mind, or you're thinking about it because your supervisor somewhere has asked you to think about it. When you're writing a software product and you're thinking about, are people going to get hurt, or is information at risk? You start thinking about your safety and security concerns. Or if you've just had some experiences, good or bad, on using tools and you want to share them with your coworkers, then that's lessons learned. So hopefully we're on the same page now when mentioning software process. And a couple ways that it can help you. The obvious ones help you better engineer your software, make it more safe, secure, improve the quality of it, help you manage your software. Larger or longer your project, more managing it as can be, to help you collaborate within your project. And with the project itself, capital T, code forward. And then help you prepare for different aspects of software development. If you want to release your software, they're going to start asking you things about your process. If you want to adapt to change and involve your software. Also helping with unplanned staff changes. So got some pictures there on the side. If somebody on your team wins the lottery or is hit by a bus, you have documented, you have things that you need them to make it a lot easier for somebody to take over. Or, the more middling you do 2 different projects, something like that. So the software process helps you do it better for the next time around. And for the less fun things, audits and compliance, we work at NASA, so there are certain requirements for how we do software engineering. So the process can help you explain that away too. We mentioned Agile and the Agile Manifesto. I'll just go over it quickly. You might not be familiar with the core values, but you're familiar with Agile development. And the core values state things like individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what I want to say about that is it says over, but not instead. So especially if you're doing something like Scrum for Agile, you're going to have a process that's not a ton of tools. You're all be very valuable to software development. So, like I mentioned before, I'm a software process team, as our colleagues here. We're in Code 580, Software Engineering Division, and we're supported for free as long as it's approved by our management. We're here to help with developing guideline training. If you have a training idea, always feel free to send a request to us. And as long as we have the time, put something together. We do brown bags a lot. So more informal training, but we can also put something together big and Saturn if it's really necessary. That just takes a lot of time usually. If you have questions about how other projects have done something, and especially if you have an idea of what the other project is, we can usually help you track that down because we help. We reach across a lot of different projects in different areas. So if you want to see an example of a VDP, but you don't want that big heavy VDP that you've been using, you want to see how somebody has with it being more lightweight. Ask us. We've seen an example or two.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
Cloud agnostic deployments. Have you guys played with that yet?
I have not played with that yet.
I don't even know what it is, or I didn't understand what you said.
Meaning you're not stuck to just AWS.
You're not just AWS.
You could go to Google Cloud. You could go to Azure.
Yeah, we don't really address specific technologies,
Okay.
so that's really not within the scope of what we can help you.
Okay.
But if we see it before, maybe we could point you in the direction of whoever was doing it and whoever could be your SME on it. We do have some codes who have started working with AWS, but that's kind of the opposite of what you're asking.
Bit of a loaded question, but what did your team think of the recent NPR revisions?
There were a couple good changes. There are some requirements that were lessened, some restrictions that were loosened on projects that we liked, but there were a lot more that were added that were less in favor of. So it's unfortunate that they asked us to do a lot more work without giving us more money, because the more software process requirements, the more time you're gonna have to spend. I mean, code coverage is something that a lot of people aren't even familiar with. That's gonna take a lot of time to make sure that every bit of your code is covered in your testing. But you know, fortunately, we are allowed to tailor, and so that's what we're here to help with too.
I provided a lot of baby comments, and I think I hinted at some of the stuff you mentioned.
We did too. Few of them looked into it, most of them didn't, but you know, that's how it goes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just hit submit the other day. I didn't even realize we were at this position yet, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been reviewing and providing comments all along through all the drafts, so.
Yeah, there's a couple different phases, but it feels like things are more and more set in stone.
At least since last October, for a year, we've been
Oh, wow.
interacting and reviewing and updating. Great question so far. Because of the compressed time window.
I can finish it.
Yeah. So we got about a minute and a half for you.
Okay.
The time goes really fast. If you guys have questions.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
So where it says our support is free when approved by 580, what is this approval? Like, how do we actually get approved?
You can ask us for help and
Just to send you emails?
Sure.
send us emails directly. You can ask Chris Durachka,
Okay.
the associate chief. But either way, and if we can help you, we will, and we'll at least try to point you in the right direction. But actually, this is my how I'll probably spend the rest of my time is talking about the NPR. The NPR has a ton of requirements, and you know what? We're not here to levy the requirements on you. That's not what our team does. Our team is to help you tailor the requirements, figure out the best way to implement it so that it doesn't hurt your project. And a lot of the times, we come in and see that people are already doing the things that the NPR asks you to do, because it states things like having your requirements, having your design, form testing on your software. You're probably doing 90% of the requirements anyway. So
When
I think,
NPR changes, do we get some kind of like notifications or?
with the new NPR changes,
Yeah.
there will be an email that's sent out, but
We have to sign up for it or?
I think I'll take that as a recommendation. I'll take it to 580 and make sure that at least we send out something, some kind of notification when the new changes come out. And if you already have a project, then I believe it's grandfathered in under the old NPR, especially if you've already written it into your software development or software management plan that we are following 7150.2b, then you get to keep following 7150.2b. Doesn't make sense to change your process halfway through your project if it's not appropriate for your project. So with that, I think I'm done talking. I just had a diagram of our website, software.gsfc.nasa.gov. Pretty easy URL to remember. Go there, you'll find tools, examples, templates, a lot of the things that you might have emailed me about in the first place. Now you don't have to email me anymore, but there's contacts up there, and you know, just best practices in general. This looks very waterfall. We're getting agile stuff up there too. And that's all I got. So
All right. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
I don't know if there's a way to get my email or contact out.
Yeah, we'll add all that to the notes afterwards, and we'll send that out to everyone.
Okay.
Including if we can get your slides as well to send out to everyone, then we'll have all that in a big package. We'll send it out.
Yeah.
Chances are, from a lot of these topics, we'll revisit them again, but the lightning talk thing goes kind of faster than you think sometimes. And just because we had so many people volunteer, I just want to make sure everyone gets some time there. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you for volunteering.
Of course.
Made my job a lot easier.
Yeah.
So.
You mind if I stand?
No.
used to
Have
teach
at
me,
it.
and I want to see my audience.
So Iona
Ioana.
is up next, and you're gonna be developing secure software, right?
Right.
Building in a
so-
secure, yeah. What she has on the board, not what I just said.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about building or developing secure software. And just a few words about what cybersecurity is and where software application fits in. And since we are all software developers, how does that relate to us? Why do we care and what do we need to do about it? A little bit about some software vulnerabilities, their controls, how do we build in software security, and bring awareness about the NASA Engineering Network Secure Software portal and the material they have there, and all discipline that focuses on protecting our computers, networks, programs, data from unintended, unauthorized access, change, or destruction. Right? That's the generic definition. What are the concerns in software security? Well, we have to protect our assets, make sure that we preserve the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our data and services. So the CIA is like the main triad of software security or information technology security. There are the notification, authentication, auditing, and privacy properties that also have to be preserved. Just something that I forgot to mention in the beginning. When I put together this material, I ended up with quite a bit of material, which I won't be able to cover in 5 to 10 minutes. So I will not really read the slides. There is more material on the slides that I'm going to speak. There are also a set of additional slides at the end for reference, more definitions, more references. There is a slide with courses that we can take if anybody's interested, either offered in Saturn or other sources. With that being said, just to clarify and define, so we are all on the same page, the main terms that we deal with in cybersecurity. An asset is something that we care about, something that we have in the data system services that has value and would be of interest to attackers. Attack is an exploitation of our system for somebody to get advantage. They want to get to their data. They want to impede us performing our work. A control or a countermeasure is something that we need to do in order to preserve the security of our systems. Exposure is or impact is possible loss or harm that is a consequence of attacks. And the threat are the circumstances under which an attack can happen and the consequences can happen. A vulnerability is a weakness in our system that allows attackers to exploit our system. And here are a few examples of the threats, their consequences, and the countermeasures. So we talked about CIA, so information disclosure could be a threat that would impact confidentiality of our data. What do we do about that? How can we prevent it? An example measures or controls would be encryption of data or managing our assets through access control lists. Same for availability, authorization, and the other properties. So cybersecurity is kind of an umbrella that covers many aspects. And I remember there was a meeting here a few months ago when people talked about security, and somebody says, so security is more than just compliance, right? More than just the framework and the NIST. And how does that relate to us as software developers? And I wanted to clarify that a little bit here. So cybersecurity addresses many aspects, like even the physical cybersecurity, right? I mean, the physical security, protecting our buildings, our rooms, our labs, our machines, having cameras, having keypads, locks, and so on. It also covers personnel securities. We have policies, procedures, and why do we have that? Because we want to protect from people from outside, but also we might have insider threats. And believe it or not, that's a real problem where employees can be unhappy for whatever reasons, and they might do things that they are not supposed to do, and that endanger the security of our systems. And then we have the IT system security. So what is our IT system or our information system? Well, it consists of infrastructure, right? The machines, the networks, the operating systems that we have on it, and then we also have the application software on top of that. So the infrastructure security is really an operational or a systems management problem, where we want to protect the infrastructure such that it resists attacks. So this is what the sysadmins, the network admins do. They configure the network topology, they install and maintain firewalls, they install utilities, they take care of the patches, right? So that's the infrastructure security. That's not what we do as software developers. That's not our job. As software developers, we develop software, right? However, that software will run on this infrastructure in this context. And that software can introduce security problems. I mean, it can be related to security, and we'll see in the next slide how it can be related to security. So really the focus of today's presentation is the application software and the security of that software. And that's really a development. So ensuring the security of application software is a development problem, and it's really a software engineering problem. So what is the role of application software in security? Well, it can be used as a means to attack, right? Think malware, but that's not what we do. What our software can be involved in is it can be used to protect the system, or it can introduce vulnerabilities in the system. It can have unintended effects that will enable attacks. So we all know about vulnerabilities, the patching, right? Or there are unknown or zero-day vulnerabilities. And I'm sure you've heard of bug bounties. Big companies offer reward to people who can find vulnerabilities in their software. Just a quick trivia question. Do you know what's the price for a zero-day vulnerability on the black market, on the dark market?
For what platform?
Well, just a range, like between what and what. What do you think?
50,000.
Between $5,000 and $250,000. iOS goes up to 250.
250.
Yeah, 50,000.
Wow.
I know, right? It's a whole economy out there. So, yeah, just one more remark here. If any of you develop safety critical software, probably you are familiar with the role of software relative to safety, and to me this is similar to the security, right? So we can use the software either in safety critical software. We can use the software to protect the system against hazards, or the software can be cause for hazards, right? So in my mind, security and safety are similar. It's just that when we deal with security, somebody from there is an attacker, right? There is a malicious actor that initiates those hazards to our system. So security, you can think of it just as another software quality. As we all know, software has to perform something, which is its function, but it also has to display these other properties as performance, usability, and Leighton has talked about different aspects of usability, right?
Oh, yeah.
User experience and user interaction. Reliability, safety, we are in the business of safe and reliable systems, and security is just one of those attributes. So we talked about security vulnerabilities and risks. If you happen to develop web applications, you are probably familiar with the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. Every year they look at security risks that are found out there, and they rank them. And for the last years, first one was injection. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you can see here the list of it. So so that's for for web-based applications. So how does that relate to us? Well, believe it or not, we have to care about our mission software security. And at NASA, there is an engineering network, and they have a secure coding community, and they have plenty of information there about practices and vulnerabilities, and they put together a set of the top common vulnerabilities for flight software and for ground software. And I don't have time for your answers, but to how and when we should address software security. So I'm just going to provide you the answer, and it is all the time. So we have to think about security throughout the development lifecycle, starting with requirements. So to some of us, when we think security, we think penetration testing. That's what I need to do. Well, yeah, sure, that's one of the things we need to do, but we can test for something that we don't put in, right? So we have to really build in security from the beginning. And here are the top 10 security controls for web apps. And here are some practices that are recommended in the NASA network for ensuring the security of the software that we develop. And that's a hot link there. I believe you will get access to the slides, and you can look at that in more detail. Just one more thing that I want to say. Alex and I are starting a new project, actually today, for developing a NASA secure software engineering portal. And that is kind of a easy to use, collaborative, interactive, web-based application that will contain all this information about the practices for developing secure software, tools, and all the goodies. We also think about having an assistant or a recommender where you will put in information about your project, and it will recommend what are the best practices for that specific project. And I want to take this opportunity to say that we will need your input, because we want to apply good practices like user-centered design to it, and we want to build this for you so that you can use it. And we'll probably come back to you to ask for your input from the beginning, not just at the end where we ask you to test it. So the takeaways: security is important for application software that we develop. It is our responsibility. We have to put on our security hat throughout the life cycle, and please support us in developing this portal. Thank you so much. Thank you for the great food. And this is our contact information. Please contact us. Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
nen.nasa.gov. I'm getting that it's down. Nen.nasa.gov.
Yeah, it might be.
Any
Okay.
work in progress. Work in progress. All right. Thank you so much. So again, we will have the notes that come out with more of the details. Sorry, it's a press time scale. So once you get going, it's sometimes you realize it's a little bit less time than you actually thought. But Leighton's going to be up next.
I think
he's good
already.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll make sure the TVs come up. Leighton, go ahead and actually make sure everyone online can see you, because I think we can actually do that now. All right.
Okay, so while Andre gets everything set up,
It's down.
Okay, but it'll be up later.
I ran into a website that it's basically a Mac app. So when you're presenting on screen, usually you would have that embarrassing notification that comes up. So it's actually called muzzleapp.com. It's a Mac app. So pretty much when you're doing presentations, these little messages that you kind of don't want everybody to see, you can actually silence those while you're presenting. It's called the muzzleapp.com. I think it's only for the Mac, but so yeah, you guys can go ahead and play with that. Okay, so for my presentation, I'm trying to see.
Giving you less time.
Of course you are. So for my presentation, I only have, I'm trying to not, I just want to speak towards the pictures. Okay, so I have the notes here. I can update it when I send the slides over to Andre. But what I'm talking about is A/B testing. I'm trying to do 1 minute per slide. So A/B testing, another term for it is split testing or bucket testing. And it basically compares two versions of a web page or an app against each other, and you determine which one performs better. So it's like you have a control and then you have the variation. You can test anything from statistical analysis. You pick your users at random. Well, the users are randomly selected, and this is used to determine what variation performs better for a given conversion goal. Okay, so how A/B testing works. So in an A/B test, you can take a web page or an application screen and just modify it to create a second version. So in this case, you see there's on the left side, you see the buy now. That's what the users usually see. And then in the middle, you would see the buy now, which is the same thing that the user would see, but then you have the variation, which is the buy now with the red button. And then you can test those to see what the outcome is. So you can say initially, the buy now brought $1,000 in sale, and then with the variation, there is a 4.5% increase. So we have definitive proof that the red button actually makes more sales. This is just a simple example, but it kind of does work. So pretty much half of your traffic is shown the original version of the page, which is the control, and then the other half is shown the modified version. That's the variation. It could be a big change, it could be a small change. Doesn't really matter. It all depends on what you want to test. Why should we do A/B testing? So this testing actually allows, this feels weird, I feel rushed. This testing allows individuals, teams, and companies to make careful changes to the user experience while collecting data on that result. So it allows them to construct hypothesis and to learn to learn better why certain elements of their experiences impact user behavior. It also helps you to answer more than a one-off question instead of saying, I would think that the red button would work. And then let's say Andre, for example, think the gray button would work. In order for us to eliminate that back and forth argument, we would just send it out, have definitive data, and then we can make a informed decision from there. There's a B2B technology company. They may want to improve their sales, for example, and increase their sales lead quality and volume from campaign landing pages. And in order to do that, they would try the A/B testing to change the headline, visual imagery, the form fields, the call to action, and overall layout. And testing one change at a time actually helps you to pinpoint what changes has an effect on the visitor's behavior. So here on screen, you see what it looks like with A/B testing, and then what it looks like without A/B testing. You can actually see the difference to 228% increase. And then on the right, I picked this graph up from the website actually had a Google. It was getting hit by Google traffic. They could actually track what was going on. So that was the paid traffic. And then you had the organic traffic. Just making small changes on your website, you can see the incremental increase, as opposed to making a paid, you're actually paying for traffic to come to your website. But without those significant changes, it really didn't matter. Okay. How much time do I have? What can you A/B test? So A/B testing, you can test almost anything that affect the visitor's behavior. It could be headlines, links, images, social proof, media mentions, award badges, sale promotions. Advanced testing, you can also do for navigation and also for the user interface and the user experience, which are two different things. The A/B testing process, it actually is, there are 6, even though the image shows that there are 5 steps, there are actually 6. So collecting data, this is where you often provide insight into where you can begin optimizing. So it helps to begin with the traffic areas of your app. It also allows you to get data faster. So you can look for pages with low conversion rates or high drop-off rates that can be improved. and then you can identify the goals. So basically you're saying, okay, what are the metrics that you can use to determine whether or not the variation is more successful as opposed to the original? Goals can be anything from clicking the button or a link to product purchases or email signups. Then we have generate hypothesis. Once you've identified a goal, you can begin generating the A/B testing ideas and hypothesis for why you think they will be better than the current version. And once you have a list of ideas, you just prioritize them and expect the impact, but prioritize them in terms of expected impact and the difficulty of implementation. Then the next thing you're going to do is create a variation. So you're going to use your A/B testing software. One is, I have a list later on, can't talk about it right now. Make the desired changes to an element of your website or the mobile experience. This might change the color of a button, like we showed earlier, swapping the order of the elements. But make sure to QA your experiment to make sure it works as expected. Then you're going to run the experiment. Kick off your experiment and wait for visitors to participate. It's pretty much the waiting game there. And then you analyze the result. Once the experiment is complete, it's time for you to do the analysis. The software will present the data from the experiment and show you the difference between how the versions of the pages performed. Okay, so A/B testing and SEO. So let me see if I can find that. Okay, so Google actually permits and encourages A/B testing, and it's stated that performing an A/B or multivariate test, it poses no inherent risk to your website search rank. However, it's possible to jeopardize your search by abusing the A/B testing. So there are certain things that they would like for you to steer away from. So no cloaking. What is that, you might ask? Cloaking is the practice of showing search engines different content than a typical visitor would see. So cloaking can result in your site being demoted or even removed from the search results. Use rel equal canonical. If you run a split test with multiple URLs, you should use that attribute to point the variations back to the original version of the page. Doing that will help prevent the Googlebot from getting confused by the multiple versions that you have. Use the 302 redirects instead of 301s, because if you run a test that redirects to the original URL to a variation, you got to use a 302, which is a temporary redirect, versus a 301, which is a permanent redirect. This tells the search engine, such as Google, that the redirect is temporary. Run the experiments as long as necessary. Running tests for longer than necessary, especially if you're serving one variation of your page to a large percentage, can be seen as an attempt to deceive search engines. So Google recommends updating your site and removing the test variation as soon as the test is over. Okay, so down here I have okay, so these are pretty much icons that I use to remind myself. So the first one on the left is a media company. So they might want to increase readership, increase the amount of 1 minute. Okay, so we can talk about that another time. A/B testing examples. So in these examples, I guess I can use Discovery. So Discovery did the A/B testing and components of their video player to engage with their TV show Superfan, and the result was a 6 signups and upgrades. And then there's a couple more that we can get into at a different date. So this is using Visual Web Optimizer to for A/B testing. So pretty much all you got to do is add the code snippet for the Visual Web Optimizer. And then the second thing you do, well, this is basically saying how easy it is for you to perform an A/B test. So the first one is to include, in this case, the Visual Web Optimizer code snippet in your website. The second is to create a variation. The third is to choose your goals. And the fourth is to start and track your test. Whew. Okay, so testing resources. So if you don't want to do any coding, you have 3 options over here that I found: Optimizely, Performable, Unbounce. If you want to do some light coding, And if you want to do heavy coding for your A/B testing, there is Genetify and Vanity. I think that's it. So
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So next up, we're going to have Will. Will's going to be doing CMS versus headless CMS.
Yes.
I'm going to give you countdown. Ready, set, go.
Wait. Do you know what a CMS is? Does anyone ever use CMS?
yeah,
What? Or content management.
Content.
That's what we didn't raise your hand. All right. Well.
All right, so we share your screen. I'll do you hit show me there, and I'll move it over. The other ones.
There you go. So you just share my screen on the.
Yeah, so if you can share your screen for those online too as well.
man, that thing went by quick.
All right. All right. So a CMS is a content management system. Very common CMSs you probably hear about all the time with WordPress and Drupal. The whole point of them is that they're for large collaborative groups. So it's not even large collaborative groups where you have a lot of people who create content, like articles, videos, whatever, and they all need to upload to the same general space. Think of YouTube, kind of a content management system where each user uploads videos. They can manage literally anything. They all just take data, put it in a database, and then they pull from the database and then throw it on the front end. The traditional CMS, front end and back end, are one with each other. When people go to upload, they go to the front end and they log in and they upload. All the major ones, Drupal, WordPress, and the other ones later are just not even worth to mention, are written in PHP. Anyone PHP? Anyone writing it ever? Anyone working it? All right, cool.
I made jokes about it.
There we go. Good. So I can say your boy doesn't want to learn PHP. So these are usually great for content creators, but they're not very dev friendly. Not just because of the PHP thing. I mean, because of the PHP thing as well, but because they're very clunky. In order to get any custom code on there, you need to write your own plugin. I am young. I am a JavaScript developer. That's a lot to ask for. So whenever I saw this interface, I told myself I can't let this chicanery continue. This is really bad. So I did a lot of research and found out there's a thing called a headless CMS. A lot of the traditional CMS is, there's no way that's the right way to say it. The traditional CMSs right now, they're all having a headless version. They're starting to realize that their front end stuff isn't too hot. This is probably due to the advent of front end frameworks and how crazy web development is now. So what does it mean? All it is it just takes the front end and gets rid of it. All you have instead is a database and an interface for people to upload to the database. And then what happens is it converts it into an API, and then that's it. You just call the API. If you think about it, it's literally just an API creation tool. But it's not at the same time, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't. Let me show you. I'm gonna show you. This is a really fast talk. That was the last slide.
Live demo time.
Bam! Look at this. It's something awful. Here I have a bunch of sample data that's all in Latin. Everything. This is what you usually see. This is Drupal, one of the more popular ones. I think the second most popular. I think now 36% of all websites on the internet are in WordPress, which is pretty insane. So yeah, these things are actually really popular. How long? We're good. I'm not going to take you through these menus because they're awful, even though I just clicked on one. Yeah. Oh, there's already a security update. Don't look at it. So there is a button. I was planning on finding the button for you, but it's bad. You click it and it turns it into a REST API. Just like that. It just turns it into a REST API and exposes it. And then you can go here and you can call this API and you have all your data in a nice JSON format. So here you have the same exact data that I just had. There are now a bunch of startups who are realizing that these traditional CMSs are bulky and heavy and gross, and they're doing their own things, such as Butter. Butter has the most aesthetically pleasing logo I've ever seen in my life, if you can see it. It's a little pad of butter. It's the same thing. You have your blog posts, you have, or let's say this object is a blog post because you create literally whatever content you want, any content template you want. You can go in here, and as you can see, I'm pulling all this data. You can go in here. The nicest thing about this is that if a content creator wants to make something, they can make it and publish it and never bother you about it. They never have to talk to the developers or IT or anyone, ever. They can just go here and type all their stuff, and then they're, I want to publish it now, and then it gets published. And then, well, stop spinning, please. Are you done? You are done. And then bam, it's just there. It's literally just an API creation tool, except it has an interface where, you don't have to be a developer to understand it.
So is the UI still usually managed by like Drupal and WordPress, or?
No, the UI for the actual the actual website that the end user sees.
Yeah.
No, it is managed by this guy.
So you have to go to YouTube.
Yeah, if you want. The whole thing is that you're supposed to create templates.
Yeah.
And then you just pull data and just put it on there.
So how long before Code 700 shows up at your door? If you're going out and publishing these stuff.
Don't say nothing. No, I'm
different than using Drupal or WordPress.
Yeah.
The other ones that most of our public sites are using.
Yeah. Another nice thing about this is that there is no public-facing login here, which I know is a very huge concern. I've gotten a lot of fuss about. With Drupal and WordPress and stuff like that, you're going to have that. With this, you're not. It's a static website. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions? No, nothing.
Awesome.
Well, I've never used it, but does Drupal and WordPress let you configure that stuff all locally, or is it stored on their servers and stuff?
No, you can host it locally.
Yeah, you can host it locally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Minute and 40 seconds is fair.
How many seconds?
1 minute and 40 seconds.
Oh, yes, I told you.
Yeah. Nice. Nicely done.
I plan for other people going over.
Yeah.
Is it yours? Is that yours?
Oh.
All right.
I forgot about it too.
So next up, we have Kareem.
120 seconds.
Should be good to go on the same. I don't want to butcher the title. I have requirements for trustworthy web services and email.
It changed.
But it changed to whatever's on screen now.
Now it's HTTP BOD OMG. All right.
I like that. That's
So,
right.
quick introduction. I'm from headquarters. I work for the IT and communications division there at headquarters. But I love coming here because the developers at Goddard are awesome, and this is always a great event. So
You paid to say that too.
I was paid to say it in pizza. So I wish I could have given this talk about a year ago, because that's when a lot of these topics were sort of hot and heavy for the agency. They're still kind of pertinent, though, because I still get a bunch of emails asking about them. In the last maybe 2 years, there's been a bevy of activity at the federal government level about how various websites and email systems are set up across the Fed. There's a lot of initiative, big pushes to get things secure so that the public, when they communicate with the government, can have some faith in the government being secure about its stuff, right? So I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the tech behind a lot of the compliance standards that have been thrown upon us from OMB, DHS, et cetera. The first one is OMB M1513. It came out in 2013, but nobody really paid attention to it until 2016, when DHS started scanning the entire Fed to see who was compliant with it and who wasn't, right? Obama era administration stuff, really cool. Policy to require secure connections across federal websites and web services, also known as the HTTPS only standard, right? So this is kind of like the colloquial name that it got. it levied a lot of requirements on people that weren't always entirely clear. So let's start with the very beginning. It defines what a web server is. So what is a web server? Simply speaking, it's anything that has, and this is from the perspective of DHS performing these audits, anything that has a .gov TLD that will resolve in public DNS. So do you know server.nasa.gov? Yep, and here's the IP for it. And that IP resolves some service, some listening service that speaks HTTP, right? So, skip ahead. So do you speak HTTP? Get / post / whatever, right? And it replies back, yep. And it gives you some kind of a code, 2 ***, 3 ***, 4 ***, all of the different HTTP codes. This got a little bit tricky because there's a lot of tech out there that listens on 443, 80, 8080, 8443, never intended to actually serve up web content, but replied to HTTP requests because it was supporting some other underlying technology. A lot of Microsoft stuff that would reply to your HTTP request with a code 400, but never actually ever intended to serve up web pages or whatever. It was just sort of like an endpoint for some other service to ping the thing that actually lived at that host. So obnoxious, misuse of HTTP, misuse of common protocols and paradigms across the internet. It was real bad. But to make things simple, what is a web server? Public DNS resolution, listening web service. You're live. You're a web server. You fell under the restrictions and requirements that were levied upon us by the federal government for OMB M1513. All right, so what is a compliant web server? Simply speaking, it says that if your web server listens on a common HTTP port, the only response that it could give you in a compliant manner is a code 300 redirect to an HTTPS endpoint. That's the only thing it can do. Can't serve up a 400, can't serve up an error 500, which got really tricky because, like, how can you make your web server give a proper response if in fact all it's responding with is something screwed up on my server side, right? Got a little bit tricky, but there were workarounds for it. Once you hit the HTTPS side, hey, could I have this thing? Thing.html, HTTPS, you get a real serious response back from the HTTPS server. Greetings, yes, I am a serious computer. Here's my X509 certificate. That certificate has to pass certain requirements. First of all, it can't be signed by itself. It can't be not valid until tomorrow. It can't have expired yesterday. And you have to provide all the intermediary certificates that go all the way back up to your root CA. I'm like a web developer by background. I didn't know about any of this stuff until this summer. I could have reasonably subtitled this talk, Things I Learned Over My Summer Vacation, because like this was all news to me. I didn't know how like DNS resolution worked until like maybe around April of last year, okay? But so this is really interesting. Now, you'll see the ones that I kind of point out here are NOCA, right? The NASA Organizational CA. The intermediary certs, when you use a NOCA cert, is NOCA itself and US Treasury. They are the organization, the agency that signs our certificates before it gets signed by the root CA, Federal Common Policy CA. Really interesting. And if your web server doesn't give those two middle ones, you have an untrustworthy chain of certificates, and you will fail some of the requirements that DHS was levying upon us. This is made increasingly interesting because a lot of modern web browsers do not have Federal Common Policy CA in their root trust stores. This is reasonable because, you know, the people who build Mozilla and stuff are like, government is untrustworthy. No, I'm not going to trust your potentially screwed up federal PKI system. I refuse to do it. Federal government is trying to work those things out. FPKI is going through like a huge reform process now. We're trying to get right with modern technology in the government by offering up CAs that Mozilla would be willing to trust. And then hopefully everybody else follows suit. Right now there's a gray line from Internet Explorer and Safari because they currently trust Federal Common Policy CA, but they've openly stated that they plan on not trusting us in the future. So there you go. Yeah, I know, it's like real political. So assuming you do all those things, you're not self-signed, you are not expired, you're running within a valid time window, and you have all the appropriate intermediary CA, intermediate certificates being served up, you follow all the rules, you're counted as compliant, you now have a compliant web server. there's one more piece to this. When a client asks a server, hey, could I have this thing? It replies back with something called HSTS. This is strict transport security. This is a nifty little tool that when you do it, the client, i.e. your browser, not necessarily i.e., but a browser, says, okay, from now on, for the next however many seconds as defined by the max age in that header that gets passed back to me, I will remember that anytime I try to go to server.nasa.gov, I'm going to try the HTTPS endpoint first. I'm not going to default to the plain text one. Very useful sort of tool to have. There's a follow-on to this called preloading, where if you are sure that all your subdomains are in fact going to abide by these HTTPS standards, you go out to Google and you say, Google, I want you to preload my domain, at which point, anytime in the future when Chrome gets built, it will know inherently that it always goes to the HTTPS version of your site. Now, Veterans Affairs broke themselves like really badly a couple months ago because somebody put preload on their top level domain, va.gov, but they were not ready to have that preloaded. And then some industrious person out on the internet said, they put preload on their domain name and they're not ready for it. So they went to Google and submitted va.gov. And so va.gov essentially ended up DOSing themselves. Mm-hmm. I kind of laughed about it. I felt bad about it, but not really. So anyway, this is really cool because all of the tools that DHS uses to audit for these criteria are in fact open source developed. It's a product called Pushed. It's the primary tool that they use. It's out on github.com. They are actively contributing with people across the federal government and across like commercial to build this tool, which is kind of neat. I actually managed to become a contributor. I was working with the Docker file stuff, and you can see I'm a horrible coder. My last commit, which was 11 months ago, is just kidding about the slash, because I kind of made a typo, and I committed stuff, and I was like, oh, crap, I just broke the product. Okay, so there's a whole other side of this conversation called BOD 1801, which is about trustworthy email. And there were a whole rack of new technologies that I had to learn about to make this stuff make sense, but I don't have time to talk about them here. High level, they include this thing called StartTLS, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, and they're all actually really cool. And look, there's like lots of pictures and slides, and I even have some sample stuff that people can look at, which you can all look through once I give Andre the slides. All right. Thanks.
All right. 15 seconds. Yeah. 10 minutes is hard. Yeah, it's really hard. All right. Keep me honest.
Do you need this?
No. So any of that stuff have to do with why like half of the NASA websites have insecure certificates or invalid certificates?
Maybe.
Like
a large HR site where you were running HTTPS. You have a NASA certificate. The thing is, but when we hit it,
it's considered valid.
It says it's not secure.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's a lot of.
Let's
NASA
talk after
domains.
this.
Yeah, the root.
We'll talk after this.
It's added automatically to the.
Yeah, if you have an ACES workstation, then your trust store should be updated with Federal Common Policy CA. Actually, you should trust NOCA inherently, so you don't even have to go all the way back up to root CA to be trusted. But anyway, we'll let Andre talk, and I'll happy to answer questions later.
All right, ready, set, go. All right. So I'm last. We're going to do DSL for your unit testing and integration testing. I was supposed to do like the whole slide thing, but I didn't have time, so I have a bunch of things up there. So I'm going to ask the question: how many people actually write automated tests? Be honest, say so. Two in the back, one right there is kind of fuzzy. Okay, all right. So I know you don't write unit tests. All right. So what are the pain points in writing unit tests, automated tests? What's one of the reasons why people that didn't raise their hand didn't raise their hand?
Takes work.
Takes work. Yeah, it does. So one of the key pain points is that tests become flaky, right? It becomes like, yeah, I wrote this test, and then all of a sudden later on it's failing, but it's failing because of something really stupid. And now I have to spend all this time to go back and update the test when I should just be writing the code. And then people just throw it away. They start doing it, it's hard to start off. Once they get started, it becomes more work than they want it to be, and they drop it, right? So talk here is all about helping those two problems, right? How do you not make your test be flaky, and how do you make it so that you can write tests a little bit faster so that it doesn't bog you down in writing tests. So the DSL can help with that. The answer's already up there, but what is a DSL? Anyone know what a DSL is?
Domain specific language.
Yeah, so domain specific language, right? So it's basically, and I stretch language a bit here. This is more like a syntax, so to speak, what I'm going to show you. But what it does is it helps you to express what you want to say in an easier way for that specific domain, right? So, and I'll show you examples of that. I have a link there for the examples, and now everything else is just going to be code. So here I'm going to jump down to some code. Probably horribly small, so we're going to
Turn off the light.
Yeah, it's all right. Dark theme all the time. Let's see. Let's make this bigger. So this morning I was writing some code. I have an application that I'm building, and I'll show you guys what it looks like really quickly. Hopefully everything works, because that's how it goes when you're demoing. Yeah, I probably do. I probably do. So this is our app that's taking a little while to start up. I probably should have started before. I'm going to close Outlook. Close Outlook. Oh, yeah, Outlook. All right. So this is our app, starting up really, really slowly. And the thing that I'm working on is an onboarding feature. So we can automate our onboarding process. So someone go here, add an employee. They say you have a description, blah, 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 blah. And they may have certain facility access that they need to get into. So here you go and check what facilities you need to go into and all that stuff, and you can add facilities, whatever. So the part that I'm working on right now is the portion where the facilities get listed, and also adding a new facility to the list, right? So that's going to get called to an API. As you can see, actually, here, there's a problem here. The dash seems weird that it's nothing before the dash, right? There's something actually missing here, right? And the name should come before the dash, and then after the dash, the building number and the room number. But that's not showing up, right? Didn't actually do this on purpose, but I thought it would be a nice, nice test. So if we look at our API here, let me find it. Web API. And that's lots of layers down. We have a facilities API, and what's happening is we're calling against this get all. We're getting our list of facilities back in JSON format, right? So something is wrong with this API. So let's write a test for that guy. So I've already kind of preloaded some of these, and I'll show you some of where the DSL comes in. Are you guys familiar with the range, act, assert, that pattern? So if you're not familiar with it, it's a nice way of setting up your test. You follow that pattern, you say you arrange the test, you set up all the criteria for your test, then you execute your test, and then you assert something on the results of that test, right? So if you follow that pattern, it works everywhere. The places where you think it doesn't work is because you didn't split the range and the act part apart. So for example, the first test I usually write is just can I build the thing that I'm trying to test, right? Very general, get you rolling. It's really almost always easy, but it exposes problems. When I wrote this morning, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to do all these other things I need to do beforehand to actually build my thing, and this test caught it, right? So I went through that 5 minutes. Ooh, man, that's not bad. Let me do this in 5 minutes. All right, so here, what I'm doing here, this is the start of our DSL. You notice there's a facilities controller SUT builder. Right? And SUT stands for system under test. That's a short way of saying that. And what I have here is a builder class to building my system under test, right? And so here I just say, hey, builder, I'm on a new system under test builder. Hey, builder, build me the thing that I'm trying to build. And then I just assert there, does that thing exist? And is it of the right type, right? Pretty basic. Generic didn't actually catch my problem, right? Next up, I built another one. I said, hey, I want to test the get all function. I want to test that it returns all the things that I said, right? Very simple. Actually, this is another thing. When you're writing your test, a nice way of putting it is like the thing, the action, and the expectation, right? So that when you see it fail, you see it in your list of failed tests, tests, then you can easily see, kind of get a glimpse of what happened, especially when you start seeing a list of tests fail, and you can see, okay, they're all in this specific area. So maybe there's a problem with the class before you even dive into the deep parts of it, right? So here, I have that sub builder that we talked about before, and you notice another function here. It says add facility, right? And here in this function, what we're doing is adding a facility. And so I can easily see what the context of this test is. There's nothing outside of this area that I'm doing. Well, let me take that back. There is. I can see what the context of the test is that's pertinent to the test right there in line with the test, right? So all the things that are important, I can see right up front, right? So I'm adding a facility. I'm adding another facility. So we're adding the rock. We're adding the G6. We're adding the crow's nest. And we're saying, here's the room number. Here's a building. Here's a room. Blah, 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 blah. And so if we dive into that a little bit, we'll see what that guy's actually doing inside of our system under test builder, right? So when I call that function, I first check a list of things that I have already internally. Say, does this thing already exist? If it does, don't do anything, right? Because it already exists. If it doesn't exist, I need to create a new facility, right? And there's other things in here. There's an ID. There's a GUID. There's a bunch of other things that are necessary for the object, but are not necessarily for you understanding what the test is doing, right? So I hide those things away in my builder, right? And 3 minutes, okay. So then I add it to the facility, and then I build go back to here, nope, not back to here, back to here. Then I build my environment, and then I have my system under test, which is actually a controller, and I call that function, and I assert that I get back the number that I'm expecting, right? That, again, didn't save me from my failure, right? There's another failure. I'm not getting back the name that I expected. So let's write another test to verify what should be happening there. So, running. Stop running. You don't need to run. All right, so let's write another test here. And you notice what I'm doing, I'm actually taking the test I had before, copied it, pasted it in. But the difference here is I'm probably going to insert something different. So let's say we do a bar. He knows I can't spell. I can spell less on command. All right. We're going to add another facility. I hate the trailing white space. I'm sorry. It bothers me. I can't see it. Let it go. Add another facility. We're going to call this guy. So just like that, I easily created another facility in my test, right? I should get back 4 this time. We don't really care that we get back 4 per se. So I can actually exclude that because it's not really pertinent to the test here. What I really want to do, insert that. And this is not the way I would write it, but I'm not going to do it right now. I don't know if I have time to do this right. So we're going to just do it. Less than a minute. All right. So we're just going to do this. All right. So, gosh. All right. We're going to insert true. That. This guy should fail, right? Because it's basically saying insert that this statement in here is true, that one of these guys has a test name, a name that's equal to the test name. Not the way I would actually write it, but we don't have a lot of time. So let's build this guy so we can find our test. Come on. We don't have time to actually debug it, but I'll show you. I know where the problem is, and we'll just kind of jump to the problem. Where's my test? This one. ones here that are not put into our. So we'll just go further down. There's our test. Let's run that guy. That test failed, right? And the problem actually is, and we'll skip to the end here. In this function here, you notice I have 1 out of 2 tests that are passing, right? In this, where I create a model, so I have my internal entities, but I don't want to expose my internal entities. So I transform them. There's like a load transform process. In that transformation function, I am missing a key thing. I don't have name. Right? I'm not converting the name over to the model. Right, so let's just add that object of name. All right, now let's rerun our test. I didn't actually test if this works, but I believe that's the problem. Rerun our test. Green. There's the test, right? So now I had these, I just wrote a whole new test really easily, right? Because of this pattern, right? But also what ends up happening, let's say, for example, later on I have a field that's absolutely required, right? But I don't want to have to go back and rewrite all of my tests and add this field in. I can go into that builder class, this build function right here, and I can add those things in here. If this is not supplied, then put this default in place, right? So now I may have a series of tests that fail because the API has changed. I can go into the one place in the builder class, make that change, put in a default, putting maybe an optional variable into my add facility class that says if it's not supplied, either put this default in, or in the builder class, I can say put this default in if you don't see one. And now all those tests should theoretically still pass because the thing that we were testing for has not changed. And going forward, I can now write those tests in a way that is appropriate as well. All right, so this makes your test not flaky. It gives you a nice, easy pattern. So once you put the builder in place, the builder may take a little bit of time to put in place, right? But once you have that builder in place, then it makes it so easy to write a bunch of tests that will not be flaky afterwards, right? So I'll show you guys really quickly. This is a really simple case, but there are other cases where it requires a lot of context ahead of time. And that's where the builder pattern also helps you with. So, for example, Web API controllers, we have a security algorithm test. And my security tests are security is really complicated, right? So you'll see here, let me find one that's probably, none of these are showing it. So I have this little thing here that says with defaults, and I have a couple of defaults that I set up and I put it in there. That's I want to add a user, right? I don't need to know how to build a user. It's not really relevant for me. So in this add user function, it does all the things to build an appropriate user, right? And I can just see that Andre was added, right? And then I can say, I want to log in as Andre. And now because it has that context, it will say, even in my builder class, if I put logged in as Andre and I didn't actually add Andre, it'll just add Andre and then say you log in as Andre, right? It has that smart so that you can see the things that you need to see. So if you look at this one here, it just shows you, now I need to add the security permission. It says, here's the key, here's the user, here's the thing, and here's another thing that's relevant for that thing, right? And I can see all the context in my test. There's nothing really that's pertinent to my test that's not here, that's magic, that the builder is not already going to do for you. And so now when someone else comes behind you, they can say, okay, why is this not working? Here's the context, and they can easily see it, right? And if I change that context around, I need to change it in one place, and it'll apply to all my tests going backwards and going forwards. So a really useful pattern. And with that, I'm probably like 2 minutes over. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Like 30 seconds at max. Huh? I went last. All right, so yeah, I'm over. So yeah,
I enjoyed it.
So we'll have all the notes. I'll try to compile everything and put it together and send it out to everybody. We'll try to do this again. I think it was really useful. We started a little bit late, and that's why we had to compress. I think everyone, after the first 3 people, everyone got 9 minutes instead of 10. But we'll figure that out next time. But I think it worked really well. So thanks, Kareem. Thanks, Leighton. thank Will, and I will thank Alex and Ioana.
I'm not driving back to
If
DC.
it
I'm
doesn't
staying here, so if
pronounce that
anybody
way,
has
but in
questions
Romanian,
or
that's
wants to
how
talk.
you spell that way, but it sounds Ioana.
Okay. Guys, take food. I didn't bring a sign sheet because I forgot. Just email me and let me know that you guys were here. Go hit me on flat. Yeah. We might have to, or we have to go back over your offer. We may have to pair. Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for picking this up too. Appreciate that.
And then the government.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
What do I want to do?
I'll just bring them over. Just go around upstairs now.
You want to hang out with Rick? Sure.
Yeah. So I'll bring them up.
There's at the desk.
High requirement. Fresh course.
Oh, yeah.